Got it.
Welcome
So,
to our church information series. We're recording this session.
so good morning, everybody, and thanks for coming by to talk about this really important subject. This is one of our church information series presentations. And today we're going to talk about celebrating our lives and preparing for our final days. Oh, it's up there and everything. That's good. So there's a lot to be said about making your final wishes clear. I've worked with so many families after a loved one has passed. And so often, one of the biggest challenges that they face is they don't know what their loved one wanted. You ask them about what readings would they like? Would they like to have music or not? What can the church do to support them? They have no idea what their loved one's wishes were. And so it's really nice. It's such a lovely gift when we can tell them what you wanted, or when you've left behind for them that message of what you wanted. It gives them some comfort. It helps them to know that they're doing what you wanted them to do. And so every Lent, the church reminds us about this topic. We're going to be nudges about it and just keep bothering you. It's a great time to look at this and to do your planning. No matter what age you are or what situation you're in, it's always good to do your planning, and especially important to plan before you're ill. It's better to be healthy and strong and make your plans. If you happen to be among the few people who have already done this work, good for you. Kudos. Pat yourself on the back. But it's still a good time to review them. Every year, we're going to remind you during Lent, review your end of life decisions and see if there's anything that you might want to change or update and make decisions with that. Okay. So today, planning your own memorial service and obituary. We're going to talk about planning ahead. We're going to talk about options in your memorial service, like the type of service, lessons and readers, homily and remembrances, music. And then we're going to talk about writing the story of your life. That's where the obituary information comes from. And some ideas on how to make your wishes known. First, the importance of having a service. And some people say, I don't want people to fuss over me. I don't really need that. I don't really want that. And my advice is, it is helpful for your family. Do it for them. It's really more for them than it is for you anyway. You'll have moved on, but it provides them a way to honor your memory and to grieve their loss. So think about how important it is to other people, and please consider having a memorial service, even if it's just a simple one. It'll be, for the sake of your loved ones, a great way for them to wrap things up for you. Preparing for the end of your life. I recommend making an end of life file. On my desktop of my computer, there's an icon that says open when I die. It's on my computer at work. It's on my computer at home. It has messages for my family. It has my wishes for what happens when my memorial service. It has our will. It has our family trust. Everything's in one place. And another thing that's in there, by the way, is a list of how they find my passwords. And now passwords move and shift and change, right? So we got an online app that's a password keeper. And so all that's in that end of life file on mine is what app it is and what the password is to get into it. So every day, John and I do various things with our passwords, and they're all in one place and they're always updated. All they need to know is where to go find them. So it points them in the direction that they might need to go. Putting in there, hi, Axel, you have a car? Very cool. Thanks for the car. That's really cute. Are you going to open it up? It's a color shifter car. That's so special. If you put it in water, it changes to red. That's so important. Nice. Nice. Well, have fun playing with it. Are you going to play with it too, Zinnia? Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. We'll talk about it later, but if you have little ones in your family, it is important to leave little things for them, to leave little messages for them, to leave a stuffed animal or what have you. There's also some really fun stuffed animals. I won't mention the name of the company that makes them, but there's a lot of stuffed animals that you can leave a message on a recording in the little stuffed animal, and when they push on it, it talks and it's your voice. And that's been a very important and special thing when my goddaughters, when their mom died, and they were young, I think Jordan was maybe 7 and Kira was maybe 8 or 9 when it happened and they lost their mom. We had recorded her voice saying how much she loved them, calling them by name and saying how much she loved them, and put them in little stuffed animals for them. And then she was also very close to one of our sons, our little boy, Teddy, who was like 8 years old at the time. And we made one for him too. And those children just hang on to those because it's got their mama's voice right in there. So think about what you'll leave for little ones as well. So in this end of life file, your will, notes about your life so that they can put together your obituary, a list of all your accounts and passwords, medical records, medical power of attorney, and whatever other important records you might have. It may take some time to prepare all these things. And there's a word about being a human being. Big tasks that take a lot of steps, we're more likely to put off and not do. So I tell you what, it's Lent. Make a commitment to do a little. You know what? Make it an appointment with yourself to work on it every Tuesday or every Saturday or whatever. If that's too much, find a time, set a timer. And if you find you're really having difficulty doing this, set a timer for 15 minutes and do 15 minutes worth of work and then stop. And you'll have broken the ice. You'll have started something. And then before you leave that session, that 15-minute session, pick your next time when it will be and do another 15 minutes. It's something you may have to space out. It's deeply emotional work. And so you may not be able to do it all at once. When you have things completed, as you get them done, I recommend that you keep a hard copy and a digital copy. So if you keep things in your computer, keep a copy there too. Give a copy to your next of kin or whoever your power of attorney is. And memorial service plans can also be kept on file at the church. And families often call us and ask, do you have any of my loved ones' last wishes? And we look them up for them. This is a little bit about the Episcopal Church's perspective on death. And this is straight out of the Book of Common Prayer. They want us to remind you that every time you have a memorial service, it's an Easter liturgy. So we're having a memorial service on Saturday. And even though it's Lent, we're still going to change the frontal to our Easter linens. We're going to have flowers. It's going to look just like every other time we had a memorial service, even though it's Lent, because to us, every memorial service is an Easter service. We find meaning in the resurrection, and that is powerful for these services. We believe that because Jesus was raised from the dead, we too will be raised from the dead. And so our liturgy is joyful. It's a celebration of people's life. And so we invite people to come. We still do it reverently and respectfully, but we do celebrate what their life was, and we look forward to the time when we can all gather together around the heavenly banquet table again. We talk to people about the fact that grief is not unchristian, though we are joyful for the person who's moved on. We of course grieve. We feel bad for the loss. We feel an emptiness, and it's a difficult thing because we really aren't beings that are made to be apart from each other. We're made to be together in heaven, but we're having this worldly journey, and for a while we get separated, and that's very difficult. We remember that it's holy to grieve. Even Jesus wept at the grave of Lazarus. And so we rejoice that Jesus is always with us. And at the same time, we're sorrowful and we stand with those who mourn. A little general information about the memorial services here. Our sanctuary is beautiful and it's decorated in the same way every time we have a memorial service. It's set in white, that's the color of Easter. And the reason for that is it symbolizes hope and it reminds us of the resurrection. If there's a casket present, it's always closed. The casket or the urn, whatever is present with us, is covered by a white pall, which the church provides. It's really important to us that it look the same as everybody else's memorial service because There are some folks among us who have far more money that they might want to spend on a memorial than others. As a matter of fact, even if the sheriff's department calls and says, we have somebody who needs a memorial, but their family has no money, they have nothing, we say, bring on over. It doesn't matter. We bury everybody. That's fine. So bring them on down. And our memorial services, you walk in and you see it, you would have no idea if that was a prince or a pauper. You would have no idea if it's the wealthiest person in town or if it was somebody off the street. They look the same because we're all beloved in the eyes of God. And so we believe very strongly they should continue to look the same. Now, sometimes we have families that want to have big sprays of beautiful flowers, and that's all lovely, but they don't belong inside the church. They belong out in the narthex, which is the lobby, or they belong down here if this is where the reception's going to be, or maybe they're going to a restaurant or somebody's home for a reception. They belong there. But the church itself is beautiful the way that it is, and it does not need a lot of expensive things to dress it up. It looks just fine, and our own flower guild can prepare the flowers and do a beautiful job of them. So regardless of your financial means, it's always the same. But I sometimes have to have this conversation with families who want to do bigger, bigger, bigger things. And it's really okay that it not be over the top. Pictures, other memorabilia are fine to put out on display. We can put a table in the lobby so that you can lay things out, or sometimes we put tables in here. People can put pictures or paintings or whatever they might want to display. Those things are powerful, meaningful, wonderful. I love them, but they don't belong in the church. They belong out of the church when we're having our time of talking about all those things. Some resources. So we have two resources for you. This one is planning your memorial service, and this one is writing your own obituary. And they are also available online on our website. So if you're here and you lose these, there's no excuse there. You just go on the website, stpaulsventura.org, and look up memorials and bequests, and there it is. And if you're online now, why then that's where you're going to find this information as well. So as far as the memorial service is concerned, the first thing that you find in that packet is a lot of personal information. It just asks you your full name and your date of birth and a lot of things like that. It also brings you to some very important choices. And it asks you whether it's going to be a burial or a cremation. And of course, that's something important for you to consider. The church does not have a stand either way. We're happy to have you as ashes or to bury your casket or whatever it is that need to be done. We'll bless whatever. Um, Another really important question is, where will you be laid to rest? Now, as members of this church are given the option of the memorial garden here, and there are also lots of other choices. There are people who are buried in cemeteries, and there are people whose ashes have been scattered in all kinds of places. I do caution you, there are laws and ordinances about where you can scatter ashes. So just check on that. You want to be careful that it's done respectfully and in the best way that you can. So the Memorial Garden is a beautiful area with over 130 of our parishioners are buried there. And so it's a wonderful place for us to go and celebrate the lives of so many people that I miss. I can go over there and sit on the bench and remember those wonderful people and pray for their souls, but also for the inspiration that we might get through them, and thank them for the blessing that knowing them has been in my life. And so just visiting the Memorial Garden is a beautiful thing. Members of the church are welcome to be interred there. There is a suggested donation of $800 to be interred in the Memorial Garden, and there are plenty of spaces left. So don't worry about that. If it's a place where you'd like to be interred, that'll be fine. The memorial service we have coming up on Saturday, that person chose to be buried at a cemetery with other family members. And so I'll be going there the day before the memorial service to do the interment service and bless the burial part of it. So we'll do it in whatever way you'd like. Which brings us to this thought. Would you like to plan a burial service, a memorial service, or both? That interment, that's when we're putting the ashes or the body into the ground or the mausoleum or whatever it's going to be encased in. The memorial service is a church service about celebrating their life. And many people have both. When you think about your memorial service, it's important to consider what kind of service you want it to be. And in the Episcopal Church, we have Rite 1 services and Rite 2 services. So a Rite 1 service is the old traditional language with the these and thous of Old English, and it's beautiful. And the Rite 2 service is more contemporary language like we do at the 10:15 service. You also need to decide, will you include Eucharist? And it's a tough decision because Eucharist is very powerfully meaningful to people who are members of the church. It means so much to us because when somebody is being remembered at their memorial service, and then we gather and we have communion together, we remember that God promised the great cloud of witnesses would be present around the heavenly banquet table. And we believe that believers, past, present, and future, are all in this mystical way present at the Eucharist. So to us, it's a way to have a foretaste of what it'll be like to be reunited with them again. It's powerful to us to have the Eucharist. But oftentimes we have family members who are not members of the church, or a lot of friends who would come who are not members of the church. And so folks worry about, will it make them uncomfortable if the Eucharist is offered and they're not interested in participating? And so I reassure people that we will welcome them in a friendly way. We'll explain carefully how Eucharist is administered and make sure that everybody knows they're invited and that it's their choice. It's up to them if they want to participate or not. But still, you get to decide. Your memorial service may have Eucharist if you'd like it to, or you might decide that's just not what you want to do, in which case it's still a beautiful service and it's just about 10 minutes shorter. Then there are the lessons. So just like in a regular church service, we have an Old Testament lesson and then some kind of transition, which oftentimes is a psalm. And then we have a New Testament lesson, and then we have a gospel. If you are having Eucharist, there must be a gospel. For any memorial service, there really should be a gospel, but you don't have to have the other readings if you're trying to make a service that's a lot shorter. That would be okay. But there's so much beautiful scripture that can be included in a memorial service. Read through this booklet, has the actual scriptures are in here that are recommended for memorial services. Read through there. Or if there's a scripture that's really important to your family, my family, it's Philippians 4:6, I think it is. Whatever therefore is good or pure or holy, think on those things. It's been said at our baptisms and our weddings and our anniversaries, and so we use it for our memorial services too, because it's a thing our family just loves and always says. And it started with, I think, my grandmother, who just loved that passage. And so it became a thing that and we're going to continue that tradition. If you have traditional things in your family that are important, let's see if we can't incorporate them into your memorial service. The next choice is music. And you can have a simple spoken service with no music, and it's beautiful. As a matter of fact, there's a certain kind of beauty that comes at a spoken service that is different from a service with music. It has its own certain kind of beauty, special kind of beauty. And then, of course, music is gorgeous and a beautiful way to lift people's spirits and transition between the pieces of the service. And so music is certainly available. Having a memorial service at the church costs you nothing. We do not charge for memorial services. Members of the church and even people who are not members of the church, we bury everybody. So there's no charge for it. However, if you'd like us to hire a musician for you, the musicians deserve to be paid. And so we ask you to provide a check written directly to the musician. That way we don't have to take any of the taxes out and stuff. If they work for us, they have to go through payroll. But if they're just doing it for you, then you can just write a check directly to them. And so it costs $300 for a musician for either the piano or a organ. And then if you'd like to have a song leader, right now it's $150 for a song leader, just like the cantors do during our regular service. And you know what? They really add something to the service. At a memorial service, so often it's a mix of church people and family and friends who don't go to church. And so when you sing the songs, when we sing in church, We sing out and it's beautiful. At a memorial service, the most gorgeous hymn you think is going to sing out, and there just aren't that many people singing. Whereas when there's a song leader singing with us, people are much more bold and brave about singing along. And even if they don't, there's a song leader who's singing it, so it's beautiful anyway. So that extra thing is something I would consider if I were you, if you wanted to have music. You can do more with music than that. You can have musicians, you can do all kinds of things. We've done a lot of different things, but simpler is sometimes better. And so think about what's important to you and what's important to your family. If you have a family member who plays a particular instrument and you'd like them to play at your memorial, first of all, you don't know how long it'll be from now until your memorial. So bear that in mind for all your plans. That's why you got to check them every year or at least every 5 years because life changes, right? But you can certainly request things. It's so funny how often I have memorial service plans and it's for somebody to play something and they say, "Oh, good grief, I haven't played that in 50 years." It's not going to work. I haven't played that instrument in 35 years. I don't think I could do that anymore. You go, "Oh, well, just remember that they loved it enough to ask for it and don't feel pressured to do it." And I recommend that you keep that tone in everything you write to your family as you prepare these things. These are my wishes today. You'll know better what's right when the time comes, and I was mostly trying to please you anyway. So if these work, great. If they don't, or you have a different idea you think would be better, that's okay with me. And that frees them up to make the decisions that they would like to make. And then the last one there is flower choices. So we often ask the families if there are any particular flowers that you'd like to have included in the arrangements. And sometimes we can do it and sometimes we can't, because if they're seasonal flowers and they're out of season, there's not a lot you can do about it. We'll get what we can get. For example, the memorial service coming up this Saturday, the woman who's being remembered, her house burned down in the Thomas fire. And the family has asked for birds of paradise for the flower arrangements because after she lost her house, they cleared her plot, the space where her home had been, and then installed a bench so she could go and sit there. And she went and she had lost her cat. So she put out cat food and she went every few days and brought a dish of cat food. And then she started bringing bird food too. And she laid them out and she would sit there and she would look around the neighborhood devastated by the fire. And she said the only flowers that were left were birds of paradise. And so it made her especially happy. Every time she saw a bird of paradise, she saw that renewal. She remembered that God will make everything new again and that some things live on even in the midst of terrible devastation. And so we're going to get some birds of paradise, which is cool because we have a bunch right here on campus. We'll put some birds of paradise in our flowers for Saturday. The next one is, would you like to include members of your family or your friends as part of the service? And so there are a few ways you can do that. You might invite them to be a reader. So somebody's going to read that Old Testament, somebody's going to read the Psalms, somebody's going to read the New Testament. The gospel is always read by a clergy person, so they won't be reading the gospel. But there are other things too, especially there's a lot of big families out there who really want a lot of jobs for people. If that's the case for you, there's a few other places they could help. One is the homily is preached by the clergy person, and it's our responsibility to talk about the church's perspective on death and reassure people about our beliefs. But the family can share remembrances if they would like to. And so I usually ask them to keep it to 2 to 3 people. If you get more than 3 people, it gets really long. And so if you have 2 or 3 people, and I tell them each, no more than 3 or 4 minutes, and please write down everything you want to say and time yourself. So that way you really do have something that's in that time frame. And it also is really helpful because every once in a while, somebody will be just overwhelmed and they won't be able to read it. And so they can hand it to another family member, or I'll just take it and read it for them. And their thoughts get to be included, even though they were feeling emotional at the time, which is perfectly fine. I do not As a practice, I do not put the names of people in the bulletin, the readers or the remembrances. I don't add them. And the reason for that is because when it's time for their piece, whatever it is to read or do, I'll look at them. And if they shake me off, I got somebody ready to go. One of the people on the altar will step in and cover for that, and nobody will know. The rest of the people in the congregation there, they will have no idea that that person was supposed to read. And so it won't embarrass them that they didn't do it. So that's the reason why we do that. Now, these are all sort of rules of thumb. Do we sometimes do it different? Sure. Sometimes people have different wishes. And we had one recently where the family, I worked with the family to develop the service, but when the folks came who were actually scheduled to give the remembrances, one of them, really tall guy, came, put his arm around my shoulder, and he said, "I know you said 3 to 4 minutes, but I'm gonna talk as long as I want about my mama." I went, "Okay, I understand that, and I bear no grudge about that." The problem that happens if you have people talk too long is it's hard on the people who are sitting there. A lot of those people are not used to being in church. It makes them nervous and anxious. They're grieving. It's uncomfortable for them. We can sit there for a long time and it's great, but our guests may not feel that comfortable. And so these remembrances, I think, should be brief during the service. And if there are more, that's what a reception is for. Get a microphone at the reception and invite people to come up and say what they'd like to say and share what they'd like to share. Oh, I have another rule for remembrances. They have to be positive. I don't want to hear any of this. Well, I loved my mother, but boy, was she tough to live with. Gotta tell you, I never really forgave her for this, that, and the other. And you go, this is not the time for that. If you'd like to make an appointment in my office, I'd be happy to hear all those stories. But what you say out loud in public at somebody's memorial service needs to be a happy, maybe even funny remembrance, not the whole total of your relationship with them. We could talk about that separately. There's one other place, there's a long list that is the prayers of the people. You all are familiar with that. The prayers of the people for a memorial service, there's quite a few of them, and they're beautiful. And so if you have more people you want to read, we can put them there too. And we can even rotate and have 2 or 3 people read the prayers of the people and just rotate through the prayers. So it works very well. Before I move on to this, any questions about the memorial service part? Yes, Tom. You've made arrangements in advance. Okay, good. You're gonna be feeding the fish rather than okay, rather than sitting in church. Yeah, so the question is, can you have a memorial service even if there are no remains available? And absolutely you can. Matter of fact, we are on Saturday. We're burying on Friday and memorial service is on Saturday. But there don't have to be any remains here at all. We can remember and celebrate somebody's life and bless their family and bless them without any remains. It's fine. Yeah, it is. It's perfectly fine. It is, sure. Any other questions about the memorial service, Virginia? Yeah, instead of there being ashes or the body in a casket, could there be a picture instead? And the answer is yes. We do occasionally do that. It's not typical because usually you just put like the ashes there or the casket there. And if they aren't present, usually there isn't even a table there, just like there isn't usually during a service. But we usually put that picture like out in the narthex in the lobby of the church as people are entering. But if it's somebody's strongest desire that there would be a picture there, okay. It's not within the church tradition, but that doesn't mean we can't do it. So yeah. Other questions about the memorial service part? So I have one other comment, and that is there are a lot of people who go to these mortuaries and buy these really big packages for a lot of money. I can't tell you how many times family members have said to me, I don't know how you guys can afford to be buried. It's so expensive. It's really crazy how much money it costs to do these things. Because you have a church, you need very little of those services. Very few of those things are going to make any difference to you. A lot of those packages include putting together a service and putting together the bulletin for the service and handouts that go with the service and all kinds of things that you don't need because you have a church. We're going to make a bulletin. We're going to make a beautiful church ready for you. If you're in the memorial garden, we're going to make a space available for you. There's not a lot that they do that you need. What you do need, if you're going to be cremated, is you need cremation services. But you know that you can get cremation services separate from a mortuary? You could just go to a crematory and have them cremate your ashes. I think across the street, it's $800. They cremate the ashes, they do all the paperwork for your death certificate. That's very important. And then they deliver the ashes to us. We're just across the street from them. They deliver the ashes to us and we hold them until the time of the memorial. And in memorials, the ashes are held underneath the side chapel altar. There are ashes under there of folks waiting to be buried. And so we put them under there and treat them with the utmost of care and respect. And that's all their families need. If they're going to have a memorial service here and they're going to be buried here, then you don't really need to pay a lot of those other fees. Be careful of how expensive some of these things can be. I don't mind spending money on people that I love, but spending money needlessly is just, there's no point. Yeah. So, and if you have any questions about that, call a church and ask us. We'll let you know what we can include and what we don't. So the next piece, and I'm sorry we're going a little bit long, we'll get through this pretty quickly though, is writing the story of your life. That's this handout here, or again, it's online. And so it just goes through and asks you a host of questions. This would be a great one for one of those 15-minute timers. If it was hard for you to start, just set a timer for 15 minutes and write for 15 minutes. And it's going to ask you about your early life, where you were born and when you were born and who was in your family when you were born. And it's going to ask you about your life as a young adult and accomplishments that you had and where you lived then and what was going on in your life. And then it asks about midlife. Well, by then you're a full grown adult. What's going on in your life now? Who's in your life? What's going on in your life? How are you serving the world? What's important about that time that you would want people to remember? And then there's my later years. Where are you now? Who's with you now? What are you doing now? What from this time would you like to have remembered? And then finally, looking back on my life, this is toward the end, looking back on your life and saying, you know, my favorite things were this. I really enjoyed doing that. I really appreciated that people did this, that, or the other for me. They're the kinds of things your family will love to read about. And then finally, some of your favorite things. I just loved the birds of paradise because they reminded me that life goes on. Whatever it is that's in you, if there's a favorite prayer or poem or I don't care, scent or place or whatever it is, share it with your family. Sometimes there's something that's been central to your being and your family doesn't even know. Or they won't remember, and then you'll have said that in those notes, and they'll go, that's right. My mom always loved Philippians 4:6. That was like her favorite. She said that every time. And we printed up my dad's favorite prayers because he always did the dinner time prayers. And my dad's favorite prayers, every one of the kids, there's 6 of us, everyone wanted a copy of dad's favorite prayers, right? So those kinds of things, whatever your favorite things were, I love this resource because it just invites you to write some wonderful things. When it comes time to actually leave messages for your loved ones, I want you to be brave and bold. It's hard to do, but I can't tell you how many people I know who, after their loved one passed, said over and over again, I thought they would leave me some kind of message, and there was nothing. I could never find it. And they felt like their relationship was incomplete because there wasn't something there. And it could be as simple as a post-it that has their name on it and says, I love you. I've seen people hold on to little trinkets like that the rest of their life because it reminded them of that person and their love. So make a list of the most important people in your life and start writing messages for each one of them. It does not have to be perfect. This is not your final version. Just start. Just start somewhere. You can always add to it later. I started mine. Mine were simple little things. Then later they were letters to each of the kids. Then later I got my memorial service planned. Then I wrote the sermon for my memorial service. Okay, you may not have to go quite that far, but it's based on one of my favorite hymns, and it just speaks to what I think about death. And I left it for my family. Whether they'll actually have somebody preach it that way or not doesn't matter, because I gave my family, my children, my grandchildren, and whoever else comes after that, my perspective about death and how much I love them. And then I wrote a letter to my family. Close your ears, John. And in my letter to my family, which I wrote years after I started my file, but before I had surgery one time, I wrote to my family and I said, I have planted something in you that's going to continue to grow for the rest of your life. I filled you with so much love. I prayed for you so many times. You are never going to be away from my presence because I have just filled your being with love and presence and God's presence, and I'm in there too. And so there's this letter to them about that that they could hold on to, because I'm sorry that I'm going to make them grieve. I'm so sorry that they're going to be sad at that loss. I wish I could fix that. I wish I could stop that, but I can't. So I want to leave them something they can hold on to. Um, Funny things are great too. Little funny stories. Somebody left a whole bunch of little comic strips that they'd cut out of the paper for years. They were in their end of life file, right there with their will and their memorial service plans, all these little cartoons. Their family loved them. We published some of them in the bulletin. They were great. So, whatever, it doesn't have to be difficult for you to do. If you don't feel eloquent, that's okay. It doesn't have to be eloquent. It has to be you, whatever that is. Some people like to write and some people don't. Audio recordings are fine too. Turn on a video camera, have somebody just turn on their phone camera and have a conversation with you. And you take some of the questions right out of here. After you do this, highlight a few of these questions, have somebody in your family ask you those questions and just sit and talk. They will treasure that. It'll be so nice to hear it in your own voice and to see your mannerisms and your enthusiasm behind the stories that you tell. They're never the same when somebody else tells your story. You tell your story, and they will love having that. You also might include a picture or some music or whatever's important to you. A beautiful thing happened at one of the, I sit beside a lot of people at their deathbed. And one of the beautiful things that happened at one of the deathbeds that I've been at was that when he passed, the family sat in silence for about 5 minutes. And then the adult son went outside and started cutting flowers, bougainvilleas, just those beautiful bright fuchsia color ones, and started bringing them and setting them on the bed. And the family members just kept going to the garden, picking flowers and bringing them to the bed. And after about a half an hour, there was this beautiful ring of flowers all around the body. And the wife, the mother, went into the drawer and got out rings, a picture, a vase that was important for some reason, and other trinkets, and started putting them on the bed with the body. And then the son was a musician, and he took out his instrument and played. And we just spent over an hour right there celebrating that person's life in that way. And it was beautiful. Every family grieves differently, and it's okay. Whatever it is, that's one of the things they train us in seminary. You walk into a situation as a non-anxious presence. Before you open the door, you stop and pray, set yourself aside, and walk in that room. And when you walk in that room, you look around and you see the environment and you feel the tone and you pray that you can reflect it. so that it's not my energy that walks in. I have kind of a high energy. Some people have a very low energy. So you walk in absolutely quiet and I don't say a thing. Just be quiet, see what happens, set the tone that the family has and be respectful of that. It should be what you would have it be, what your family needs it to be, whatever that is. So start slow. It doesn't have to be extravagant, a little something here and there. Seriously, get some Post-its and just write a note with everybody's name on it and the words, I love you. That's a great place to start. Start somewhere, buy a card, buy a beautiful card. Start writing a little something in it. Don't finish it. You don't have to finish it yet. You can keep adding to it later, whatever you need. If there are young children in your life, we talked about that a little bit earlier. It is important to leave something tangible for them because they really need something. They don't, at various ages, they don't necessarily understand what has happened and they kind of come to it over time. And having something to hold on to can really help them in that time. So think about little ones and what you might leave for them. And then when the time comes, then your family will take all this and I'll help them. They'll take all this stuff that you've written, which is way too much for an obituary, but it's a really beautiful treasure for your family. And we're going to write an opening paragraph. You'll give your name, the specifics about your passing, and the second paragraph, who you're survived by, which of course we don't know yet, right? And then optionally, at the end of the obituary, you might have a final thought or a thank you or a poem or a few words about your life or whatever from the things that you shared that they might pull out and add to the bottom there. And the rest of it's just a summary of a reasonable size because your life is an entire life. It's hard to put an entire life on a single page, but they'll summarize it knowing they still have all this. They don't have to put everything in the obituary because they have this to treasure. And for those who would like to know more, they can have this. And sometimes families make copies of it so that everybody can have one. And sometimes it stirs beyond this thing and it becomes a book or it becomes a scrapbook or a photo album or whatever it is that stirs in you. There's a place in here for additional instructions and a special note that it encourages you to write to the person who takes care of this for me. If you're writing my obituary, I wanted to thank you. I wanted to remind you that I love you. Thank you for trying to make my life something that you can put on a single page and know that I appreciate it so that it prompts you to write a little note to the person who does this work for you. And they always cherish those too. So then you take this and you add it to your file. So you've got that end of life file somewhere. It's in the front of our big black file cabinet in the garage, and it's on my desktop on my computer. Wherever your papers are, make sure that file that's for the end of your life is really well marked so they can find it. Otherwise, they spend hours going through all kinds of stuff, and that's so hard because all those memories stir so much emotion. Put your end of life file at the front of the file cabinet. Just make it easy. Share it with your loved ones. Let them know that it's there. Maybe even make copies and give them a copy. File a copy here at the church. And remember, we're going to remind you every Lent to review your changes and make sure that you've kept it up to date. Any questions or comments? I applaud you for being brave enough to come today or to watch this today. It's not an easy subject. It's difficult to think about the end of our lives. And so kudos to you for doing that, because what you're going to do as you continue to follow through on these things is make it so much easier for your family. When the time comes, we're not going to be able to stop them from grieving. But we can keep them from having to do this work because we can do it ourselves. So thank you for doing that. You're welcome. God bless you all. We'll see you next Sunday.